And what was that, if you recall? Your concept, your ideas, as of September 2008.
Okay. And the plan that and it wasn't just me, it was the other executives in my company, like Paul Gongaware, in laying out a plan to present to Michael in terms of starting his touring career again. Since I think it had been 12 years since he was on stage, is my recollection at the time, was to actually start in London at the O2 and do what we call a residency show at the O2. It was internally, we called it the Mountain Coming to Muhammad, meaning instead of an artist touring with 20 trucks and all the expense of that, get fixed into one venue and then advertise it around the world. Now, obviously, it takes a very special artist to be able to do that with. And that was the first phase of what could have been a multi-year touring plan.
So you were thinking in terms of phases at that time?
That's correct.
And this had been discussed with Dr. Tomei?
Yes, it had.
Okay. So by the time you met with Michael Jackson, you don't know what Dr. Tomei discussed with Michael Jackson, I take it, but he might have discussed this particular issue, concerts at O2 as a first phase towards something greater.
Objection, relevant speculation.
Sustained.
Is that what you were going to talk to Dr. Tomei and Michael Jackson about in September of 2008?
Well, that question makes reference to an answer I just did not allow and a question where the objection was sustained. You're going to have to re-ask the question.
As part of the conversation at the meeting that you were having on September 2008, was it to discuss this phase plan?
Yes.
Okay. And did you discuss that with Michael Jackson?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Tell us, did it appear to you that Michael Jackson, your particular perception, that he was receptive to the idea?
Very.
Okay. And at this point in your conversations with him, did you feel like that he was ready to do this tour, ready to do these concerts?
Well, it's hard to answer your question when you say feel. It was apparent from his discussions with me that he was motivated and energized and receptive to the idea.
All right. After September 2008, did you have another meeting to discuss this with Michael Jackson and Tomei, Dr. Tomei?
Yes, I did. We had a number of meetings after that.
All right. And these were all held where?
At the Bel Air Hotel.
All right. Now, I want to direct your attention to these meetings that you had. This was all sort of narrowing down the parameters of the contract, the agreement. Is that fair to say?
We never discussed money with Michael. The negotiations were done separately. The meetings with Michael were more creative.
All right. Well, let's go to October, Halloween 2008. Do you recall a meeting that you had there with Michael Jackson and Dr. Tomei?
Yes.
All right. And who else was at this meeting?
It was Michael, Dr. Tomei, and I remember because we were sitting in front of the fireplace in the suite that Michael was staying in. And there was a nanny or someone who was handling the kids, watching the kids, and then the kids were there. And the reason I knew it was Halloween is because they were dressed in costume.
Did you recognize the nanny? Do you know the nanny?
No.
All right. What was the conversation about in the suite in October 2008?
Objection of relevance or limited to as it relates to the concert?
With that limitation overruled, you may answer.
Michael was expressing to me one of the reasons he had decided to restart his career.
All right, and what was one of those reasons?
The primary reason was that he wanted to finally settle down and get a really, really good home for the kids and for his family. So they weren't, in his words, living like vagabonds. That's what he said to me.
Was he emotional when he discussed this?
It got emotional, yes.
All right. When did it get emotional?
When he was just describing how they had lived, he and the three kids, and that he just really wanted to settle down. He was tired of living like that, and it was emotional. I cried. So,
Did he cry?
yes.
Did he describe where he had been living in the last few years?
Objection relevant.
Sustained. 350 and 352.
How long did this meeting last in the suite in the Bel Air Hotel?
To the best of my recollection, Mr. Chernoff, probably about an hour to 90 minutes.
Would you characterize this meeting as essentially one of the last meetings, or essentially the last meeting before, I guess, the lawyers got involved with the numbers and ultimate contract preparation?
To the
Did you
best of
have-
my recollection, probably.
And then at some point, a contract was prepared, agreed to, and signed. Is that right?
That is correct.
This contract, it provided for how many shows, Mr. Phillips?
31.
31. Is there any significance to the 31?
Yes.
Okay. What is that significance?
Michael wanted to do 10 more than Prince did.
It appeared to you that he understood the significance of that?
He came up with the number, yes.
All right. And you, of course, agreed?
Yes.
All right. When was this contract signed?
I think sometime mid-January, could have been the third week in January of 2009.
The contract was signed at Michael Jackson's residence?
Yes.
Okay. And you were signatory on that contract? You signed it?
I signed for AEG Live.
All right. And Michael Jackson signed it personally?
That's correct.
Now, tell us, Mr. Phillips, what the contract that you agreed to, how was AEG going to make money on this contract? What was your
Allow the full question, since we have multiple ones.
what was AEG's stake in the contract?
Objection relevant.
Sustained.
Can you tell us after? Can you tell us what Michael Jackson's stake in it was? Can you tell us what you could you estimate for us how much you think Michael Jackson was capable of making, assuming successful completion of the 31 shows?
Objection relevant.
Sustained. 350 and 352.
In order to put together concerts like this, there needs to be rehearsals. Is that right?
Correct.
And not only rehearsals, there needs to be a whole lot of, let me back up. There needs to be production, initial production to prepare these shows for concerts. Is that right?
Correct.
Choreography?
Correct.
All of the things that you would expect from a show a show from Michael Jackson, right?
That is yes.
All right. The costs of all of these particular preparations and production, the early production, is that something that the contract spoke to?
Objection relevance, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Would part of the contract?
May we approach, Your Honor?
You may.
After the signing of the contract in January 2009, Well, it may not have been after. You understand that you do know that Michael Jackson moved into the Carrollwood residence?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Do you know when he moved into that residence?
Well, considering we signed the contract in the living room of that residence, it had to be sometime in January.
All right. Do you know, well, let me ask you this. Did AEG Live pay for that residence?
Sustained.
You testified that the contract provided for 31 shows, right?
Correct.
And at some point, that went up from 31 shows. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, prior to may we approach, Judge? Can
Please, sure. Turn off, thank you.
Mr. Phillips, from January, and we're going to assume that the contract, the agreement was signed on January 26, 2009, for purposes of this question. From January 26 to March, first week of March 2009, was there any movement, was there any production on the This Is It concert tour?
No, there wasn't.
All right. And the initial agreement that you made that involved you and Michael Jackson Company, was for 31 shows, or actually up to 31 shows. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Was there any conversation about the number of shows? Are you familiar with the teaser, the term teaser
In advertising?
Yeah, in advertising with regard to the number of shows.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
And
No, I know. Yes.
all right. And was there some plan by AEG Live and perhaps others to perhaps tease a certain number of shows to the public to see how things would go with regard to the sales of the shows?
If I'm understanding your question.
I'm not asking right, I'm sorry, but I think you do understand.
Okay. Initially, we put 10 shows on sale, or we advertised 10 shows, was the initial run. You would never, as a promoter, put all of your shows on sale at the same time because it becomes a disincentive for early purchase.
All right, so that was the first advertised number of shows.
Correct.
All right. And when was this done?
Right after the press conference, March 5th.
All right, and that press conference was March 5th. And it was
correct.
held at the O2 Arena?
That is correct.
Okay. Now let's talk about any conversations you had with Michael Jackson between January 26th and March 5th. Was there further or ongoing negotiations at that time? Or where you essentially